Welcome to New World Now, where host Kim Corbin has compelling conversations with authors published by New World Library. They will discuss their personal journeys and share practical tools we can use to be more aware, mindful, and present in our daily lives. Now, here's your host, Kim Corbin.
Welcome to the New World Now podcast. I'm your host, Kim Corbin, and my intention is for each of my interviews to offer a fresh perspective and practical tools we can use to be more mindful and present in our daily lives. Well, I've had conversations with New World Library authors on topics ranging from love to anxiety to money and more. My biggest aha moments in the year and a half I've been doing this podcast have had to do with my relationship with my body. My conversation with Suzanne Scurlock-Durrana about reclaiming your body helped me realize how past traumas from my childhood related to body image can still influence me today. When I interviewed Amy Ehlers about her book, Big Fat Lies Women Tell Themselves, I realized that I needed to lose the harsh, judgmental voice of my inner critic far more than the extra 20 pounds it likes to judge me so harshly for carrying around. And my interview with Susan Anderson about taming your outer child helped me begin to relate to the emotionally driven part of me that wants what she wants when she wants it in a new way. The comprehensive approach to emotional eating that my guest today, Julie Simon's new book, When Food is Comfort, offers, not only touches upon and reiterates all three of those aha lessons I've been integrating into my life, it also offers a new mindfulness practice that I've been finding extremely valuable in my ongoing quest to heal my relationship with my body, called inner nurturing, which we'll be talking about today. In addition to When Food is Comfort, Julie is the author of the Emotional Eater's Repair Manual, and she's also the founder of the extremely popular 12-week Emotional Eating Recovery Program, which she offers both online and in Los Angeles. I've been very much looking forward to this conversation, and I'm honored to have Julie here with me today. So welcome, Julie Simon, and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Kim. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Yay! I've been looking forward to this. I love the book. It's so comprehensive is the best word, I think. And to start, I thought you spent a good portion of your own life stuck in a cycle of overeating, comfort foods, gaining weight, and dieting. So I'd like to start by having you tell us about what your life was like back then and how you came to do this work.
Yeah. Well, I spent so many years myself, as you said, struggling with overeating comfort foods, gaining weight, going on diets, every kind of diet I could think of. And I was never good at sticking with diets. And through those years when I was going through that, I'd say from, my teenage years on into my 20s, even up into my 30s, I always intuitively believed that our bodies are really wise, and that we're not supposed to be counting calories and fat grams and carbohydrate grams and weighing and measuring our food and getting on scales. Our ancestors never did that. Animals in the wild don't do that. So it never made any sense to me that why was I having to do this? And how come every time I went on a diet, I would lose a little bit of weight, but then I'd plateau and I wouldn't lose any more weight, and then I'd have intense cravings, and then I started binge eating. So I was on a quest for many years to try and understand all the pieces of this overeating or imbalanced eating, puzzle. And over the course of time, through therapy and visits to healthcare practitioners and all kinds of study, I began to understand that, there were kind of three pieces: mind, body, and spirit. And on the mind front, which is what we're addressing today really with the new book, When Food is Comfort, I realized that I was missing a lot of self-care skills that we generally learn in childhood, skills that would help me regulate unpleasant emotions and bodily sensations, skills that would help me validate my feelings, my needs, my thoughts, skills that would help me learn to comfort and soothe myself when I was, super in an aroused, agitated state. Learning how to, like you said with Amy Ehlers' book, learning how to reframe some of those thoughts about myself, learning how to meet my needs, learning how to access a inner supportive voice that was capable of comforting and reassuring me. So I began to piece together all these things that I was missing. And as I started to practice these mindful self-care, self-reflective skills. I didn't know it at the time. I only found it out later when the neuroscience began to come out and support this, that I was actually rewiring my brain, that the skills I was learning and practicing were actually changing the structure of my brain. And that's why I was able to have recovery, and that's why I've ever since been a fully 100% recovered emotional eater. That's the good news. There's full recovery.
Yes. And tell us a little bit more about neuroplasticity and how that works.
Yeah, neuroplasticity is so exciting. You know, what we're now understanding is that the brain is not kind of set in stone, and the brain is a very plastic or moldable organ. And so our experiences, especially when we're young, you know, even in the uterus and infancy and childhood, our experiences really shape the brain pathways, and they create connections between different parts of the brain, and they even affect the chemistry of the brain, the experiences that we have. So the experiences we have in childhood and then the experiences we have in adulthood are constantly shifting and changing the brain. And so we can do specific exercises, techniques, skills to enhance the structure of the brain, to literally rewire the way the brain communicates, the different parts communicate.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And it's exciting, like, because, and it's new. And like, we didn't even know that before, right? Like, it's a new development.
No, that's why I was saying, it's like I was doing it and it was happening and I was shifting and changing. And all of a sudden my relationship with food had changed and my relationship with myself had changed. And, you know, I didn't really understand how I did all of it. I knew the skills I had been practicing, but when the neuroscience came out, then I began to understand, I rewired my own brain. That's what happened.
Yeah. And you write a lot in the book about how, you know, we're missing self-care skills, and that's what we're going back in and developing. And you say that the book is not about blaming our parents and caregivers, because parenting is obviously a really hard job. And I would think, isn't it safe to say that most of us have areas that can use improvement as far as our parents go? Because just like we can't expect anyone in our lives now or food to fill our needs, like, no human, it's something that has to come from within.
It does have to come from within. But the thing that we know now, you know, is hundreds of years ago, even 100 years ago, kids were raised more in villages. Okay. And so if your parents weren't so good at particular skills, maybe mom wasn't so empathic, or she wasn't so nurturing, or dad wasn't, or mom had an illness and she was, you know, away from you because of the illness. There was a village. There were a lot of other people, a lot of other elders that you could get all of those emotional developmental needs met by. In the last 50 to 70 years, you know, we have single parents, divorced parents, neighborhoods are not communities, kids are latchkey kids. So the brain is really getting affected by the fact that there's kind of a lack of nurturing elders, you know, surrounding little ones, right? I say in the back of my book that I think the global obesity crisis is really a nurturance crisis of epic proportion.
Yeah. Yeah, and as I mentioned in my intro, and I really want to get into this because I've been using it in such fun ways in my life. I'll give you a little sample of what my inner nurturing voice sounds like in a minute. But the mindfulness practice that you offer is called inner nurturing, and it can help us rewire our brain by connecting to ourselves in a nurturing way. So tell us about how that works. Yeah.
So basically, if we think about the times when you want to turn to food, and certainly this book could be used by anybody, even if you're not turning to food, because anything you're doing in your life that somehow isn't working for you, you probably are missing some of these skills. But let's use food. So if you're really wanting to turn to food, you've had a stressful day, you had an argument with someone, you had a difficult day at work. Basically what's going on is there's a part of your brain, you're under the influence of an emotionally dominant part of the brain called the amygdala. It's what we call the downstairs brain. And if you're someone who says, you know, I can't seem to calm myself down, I can't seem to relax, I'm really agitated, I just grab food really quickly, then what we kind of know is that the upstairs part of the brain, the part of the brain that's soothing and comforting and regulating, isn't somehow connecting. It's not talking to the downstairs brain. Those connections aren't working properly. So that's where the rewiring has to come in. And so, if, like we said earlier, if we had all that nurturance when we were young, those, fibers in the brain would have connected those two parts, and early in our life we would have developed a voice that would be calming and soothing and comforting when we needed it. Many emotional leaders don't have that voice. It's not very well developed. So I wrote this book to help people develop that voice and the skills that go with that voice. So the mindfulness practice begins with finding out what's going on inside. So the first mindful skill is called pop the hood. And when you're under stress, you're struggling with anything, you pop the hood and you find out what's going on. What am I feeling? What bodily sensations am I having? And then we go through a whole set of skills, learning how to develop our mindfulness of our emotions, our bodily sensations, our needs, our thoughts. We're developing our mindfulness, and we're also developing a voice, a strong, inner, nurturing voice that's capable of soothing us, comforting us, reminding us of our strengths and resources, helping us hold hope that our needs can be met, and setting gentle, effective limits with us on our wayward behaviors.
Yeah. Well, I had so much fun with this, and it was almost like I think I'm a pretty nurturing person to other people. And so it's in me, and it was just so much fun. Or instead of like taking some of my critical thoughts and reframing it, and my voice would be like, girl, come on now, be nice to yourself. Like it kind of talked in that voice, and I just have been having so much fun and having it come in and say, wait a minute, like let's just stop and just feed myself with nurturing thoughts. And I really appreciated that because last week, or on my last episode, I interviewed Corinne Zepko about her book, From Anxiety to Love. And a huge takeaway I had from that book is that we don't have to spend all this time trying to dominate our inner critic or change it or analyze it, that if we focus on strengthening the voice of love within us, that becomes so strong that it helps us show the way. And I just feel like working with this inner nurturing voice, which is a whole new idea to me, really helped that start to happen.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why I wanted to write even my first book and the second book is I wanted to teach people the language of nurturance. Because if you happen to be someone that didn't get a lot of that when you were young, your parents, weren't super kind and supportive. Maybe they were loving, they cared about you, but maybe they didn't say nurturing things to you. They didn't say things like, I'm so sorry you're going through that, or of course it makes sense that you're feeling that way, or you didn't hear a lot of that in your childhood. How would you know that it even exists, right? You wouldn't even know that that kind of phraseology exists. And so I wanted to teach people, and when I wrote my first book, in there, and I have the same thing in the second book, I had a whole list of soothing words and phrases that you could say to yourself. And people in my groups said, oh my God, like I've never heard anyone talk to me like that. And it was eye-opening. And people said, I'm sending this to my mother. I'm sending this list to my sister. Like, I've never talked to anyone like this. I've never heard anyone talk. Well, people are talking like that all over the world, people that are nurturing. But many people have never had any exposure to that. Yeah. So I wanted to teach people, what does that sound like in your head when you have a voice that says, I'm so proud of you. You did such a good job on that. Oh, I'm sorry that you're feeling sad about that. It makes sense to be disappointed today. And by the way, did I tell you that I love you today? Most people don't have that very well developed in their head.
Yeah.
I do it all day. I say to my clients in my first book, I have a practice called Practice Self-Affirming Commentary. And so I say, if I mop the kitchen floor, I'm like, you go, girl, you rocked it. I talk to myself all day like that. And I teach people to talk to themselves all the time in a kind, caring, soothing, comforting way. That's what inner nurturing is all about.
Yeah, I love that. And of course, we also have to be willing to face and feel difficult emotions. It's not just about the positive, like that's part of it too, and making room for that. And in the book, you say that while we might attribute our overeating simply as a lack of willpower and difficulty coping with our current problems, our current pain is often just the tip of the iceberg of old pain. And you go on to say that in order to maintain good emotional health, we need to be able to grieve our significant losses and disappointments. So will you talk a little bit about the connection between grief and emotional eating?
Yeah, I mean, there's a big connection between grief and emotional eating. Like you just said, most of the time I say to emotional eaters, if you have a situation in your life that's triggering big emotions, right, and you think, God, my response to that seems like bigger than the crime, most of the time that's because it's tipping off some very old pain. It's reminding you of something from the past, a loss, a disappointment, communication gaps, people in your life who don't understand you, like, oh, there I go again, not getting understood. Old pain, okay? And so what do we do with old pain? Most of us just disconnect from it. It gets triggered, we feel it, and then we disconnect from it. Maybe we grab something to eat, maybe we turn the television on. We don't deal with our old pain. So what happens? Our old pain stays there. It's it's like a battery that's still got a pretty good charge on it, and every time you hit it, it's still charging. So what we want to do is we want to discharge some of that old pain, and the skills that I teach in the new book help you do just that, because when you begin to identify, so you take a situation, you had an argument with someone and it tipped off very old feelings of never being understood by your father, right? And now you have an opportunity to really feel some of that old pain and to bring in that inner nurturer. Now you're experiencing that old pain, but with kind of a very loving, kind friend that's there with you, saying it makes sense that you felt that way when your father didn't understand you. And of course you're feeling that way. And but John, your boyfriend isn't your father, and, I'm here with you to help you. And if this relationship isn't working, we'll find a way through it or out of it. So you're working with and through your grief rather than disconnecting from it. That's the bottom line to any of the emotions that anyone's feeling. The bottom line is we don't want to disconnect from emotional pain. And of course, if we've had significant trauma in our history, we may have to add some other things there. Some people aren't equipped by themselves, to take themselves through deep trauma states. But for your garden variety grieving and disappointments, a lot of that work you can do yourself, and the skills in this book will help you learn to do it. Yeah.
And let's go back. You mentioned the first of the 7 mindfulness skills for inner nurturing you offer is popping the hood. So take us through how that works.
So popping the hood is basically stopping, right? It's stopping and getting mindful. So you're about to grab something to eat. Maybe you're upset. Maybe you're not upset. Maybe you're bored. Maybe you're even feeling celebratory and you decide, I want to bake a cake. I want to bake a whole cake, right? So something's going on because you're turning to food. So I ask you to pull away from the food just briefly and pop the hood. Let's go inside. Let's ask ourselves, in this moment, what am I feeling? So most emotional eaters are fairly disconnected. Some people will say, I know what I'm feeling, but I don't know what to do with my emotions. Some people will say, I haven't the faintest idea what emotions I'm having. And most people are not very connected to their bodily sensations, okay? So what we want to do is we want to pop the hood and we want to get clear on what are those emotions that we're feeling and how are they presenting in our body? Because emotions basically present in the body. We've learned to have labels for them, but they actually present, like when an infant first has emotion, the infant doesn't have any labels for the emotion. The infant just has tension in the body, tightness in the neck. So we want to notice what are those bodily sensations and how is our body and brain getting what we call dysregulated, all right? So this situation happened, I'm upset, and now I'm getting emotionally dysregulated. My emotions are all over the map. My bodily sensations are going all over. And now in the first skill, I teach you ways to be present to those states and even to begin to calm down and soothe your body. So there are skills in there. We learn how to pay attention to those bodily sensations, put our hand on our heart, do some deep breathing, learn how to regulate our body, because if we can start to regulate our emotional system, then we can access the upstairs brain for logic and reasoning. We need to start, but we're in the emotional brain. We need to start there, and popping the hood, we start there.
And I appreciated in the book that you say that if we find ourselves resisting that journey inward, kind of to look and see what's going on when we pop the hood, that we're not alone, since a lot of people find it's kind of slow and uneventful at first. And I had a really hard time with it. Like, I would be like, okay, here I am eating the Reese's cups. And then I'd be like, time to pop the hood. And then my feeling self was like, whatever. And I was like, even though I was aware. So I was really happy to see later in the book that you suggest the 10-minute pause strategy. Will you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, it's so funny that you say that, because I think this week I probably had 3 or 4 clients saying to me, I know that I should be doing it, but I just feel I don't feel like doing it. Like, I don't want to go and pop the hood and do it. And I said, that is so natural. That's how everyone feels. Like, it takes time and it takes focus and attention. And I said, give yourself just a little bit of time. And that's where the pause comes in, where say to yourself, I'm just going to take a 10-minute pause. And I always say, give yourself permission to eat. So if you want to grab the Reese's peanut butter cups, say to yourself, I can have them. It's not like I'm telling myself I can't have it, because the minute we feel restricted, then we're in rebellion land. So tell yourself you can have it, you can eat when you need to, but I'm going to take a 10-minute pause before I eat, and I'm going to do my pop the hood exercise. The more often you do that skill, the easier that skill is going to become. You're going to start to find that, I was just saying this to someone this week, when I was first doing this, when I was emotionally eating, probably 10, 15, 20 times of doing it, there was resistance, and I didn't really feel like doing it, but then I went and did it, and I noticed that it either significantly cut down my eating or it stopped my eating. And then a shift came over time, which was incredible, where I started to feel all kinds of emotions. Maybe I came home and I was upset about something, or I was bored or lonely or whatever. And all of a sudden, instead of eating, I felt like going to my journal. Like, that shift was happening, where I was realizing that if I go to the food, I don't end up feeling better afterwards. I always end up, it's great in the moment, but then I feel a lot of shame and a lot of guilt, and I'm not building any skills. Over time, I wanted to sit down and write when I was feeling like that. I didn't want to turn to food, and that was the breakthrough. That's the breakthrough that we want to get to, is where you really want to sit down and pop the hood when you're dysregulated. You don't want to grab food, alcohol, cigarettes, whatever. That's what we're going to get to.
Yeah, the inward focus.
There's a shift. You have to get to the shift.
Yeah. And it's a process that takes time.
It's a practice.
Yes.
Just like meditation, when you want to start meditating, you don't start and sit and meditate, and all of a sudden you have this clear head and no thoughts, and it's delicious and incredible. You sit and you go, oh, I'm thinking again. There I go, having thoughts again. Like, I'm not relaxing, and I'm bored, and is my 5 minutes up? And then over time, it starts to change, and you start to get into these delicious, deeper states of consciousness. And then you start to crave sitting down and meditating, because you know that you're going to go to this incredible place. That's how inner nurturing is. Same thing.
Yeah. So it's about having patience with the process.
Yes.
Well, we have about a minute left, and so I would love for you to just offer any words of encouragement or wisdom that you have for emotional eaters out there who feel like they're never going to have a healthy relationship with food.
Yeah, I just want to tell them that recovery, 100% full recovery is always possible. I'm someone who, I don't believe that, we're always recovering. I really believe that you can get there and it's done and it's over with. And I have people, who I work with who are 70 years old, and I have people who are 19 years old. And, it's never, ever too late to start working on this and building that inner nurturing voice and, really healing and resolving your emotional eating. Just don't give up. Don't give up on yourself. Take the time to practice and learn these skills. And they can find more about me and my work at overeatingrecovery.com.
Yes, great. Well, that's fantastic. And I just want to thank you so much for being here and for writing this book and for helping us all with our emotional eating. You're doing good work in the world.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure.
That website, once again, where you can find out more information about Julie Simon and When Food is Comfort, is www.overeatingrecovery.com. I'd also like to invite you to join the New World Now podcast community on Facebook, where you can be a part of discussions about current episodes and stay up to date on the latest and greatest podcast news. Simply search for New World Now podcast on Facebook to join the group. I hope to see you there and look forward to connecting on future episodes of New World Now.
Thank you for listening to New World Now with Kim Corbin from New World Library. New World Library publishes books and audios that inspire and challenge us to improve the quality of our lives and our world. For more information about their books and authors, you can visit them online at newworldlibrary.com.